I've been a carpenter for 15 years. I've built everything from kitchen tables to custom caskets. I love working with my hands, shaping something raw into something useful. My shop is small, just a converted barn on the edge of town, but I make a living. This story starts with a phone call I should have ignored. It was a Thursday afternoon when my shop phone rang. "Bennett Woodworks," I answered. There was a pause, then a man's voice, smooth but low. "You do custom builds?" "Sure," I said. "Furniture, cabinets, shelving." "I need a box," he interrupted. "Large, about 7 feet long, 30 inches wide, needs to be solid, sealed tight." I grabbed a notepad. "Okay, what's it for? Storage? Shipping?" Another pause. "Doesn't matter, just make it strong, lockable, no hinges showing." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "Sure," I said slowly. "That's doable. When do you need it?" "Tomorrow night." That was insane. A project like that took at least 3 days. "That's a rush job," I said. "Materials alone, I'll pay double." I hesitated, then said yes. Money's money. We agreed on a price and he said he'd pick it up himself. Before hanging up, he added, almost as an afterthought, "Make sure it can hold a lot of weight. A person's weight. Maybe more." The line went dead. I told myself it was just a weird order. Maybe the guy was building some kind of haunted house attraction or storing mannequins. Still, I couldn't shake the unease in my gut. I worked late into the night, cutting heavy oak planks, sanding them smooth, assembling a box big enough for a man to lie down in. I added thick steel latches and recessed handles, reinforced the bottom with cross beams. When I was done, it looked like a coffin. I went home exhausted, telling myself I'd just collect the cash and never think about it again. The next night, he came. I heard the crunch of tires on gravel outside my shop around 11 p.m. I opened the barn doors and saw a dark SUV idling. A tall man stepped out, dressed in black. "You Bennett?" "Yeah," I said. He didn't introduce himself. He just inspected the box, running his hands over the edges, nodding approvingly. "You did good." Then he handed me an envelope thick with cash. I started to thank him, but that's when I noticed the back of the SUV. The rear hatch was open, and inside was another box, identical to mine, except this one had dark red stains along the edges, stains that looked like dried blood. My throat went dry. "What are these for?" I asked carefully. The man smiled slightly. "Not your concern. But since you're curious, why don't you give me a hand loading it?" Everything in me screamed no. But I moved like I was on autopilot. We loaded the box into his SUV. As he closed the hatch, he turned to me. "You know, you've got a nice quiet shop out here. No neighbors. No one to bother you." His words hung in the air like a threat. Then he got in his SUV and drove away, taillights vanishing into the night. I didn't sleep. The next morning I almost called the police, but what would I say? A guy bought a box from me and it creeped me out? No crime in that, so I tried to shake it off. But 2 days later he called again. "Another box," he said. "Same dimensions, same rush job." My stomach dropped. "Listen," I said carefully, "I'm not comfortable." "I'll pay triple," he cut in. "Cash." Against my better judgment, I said yes. This time, I built the box with trembling hands. When he arrived, he brought someone with him, a shorter man, stockier, wearing gloves. They loaded the box themselves this time. Before they left, the taller man handed me another envelope. "Good work. You're part of this now." And then, with a grin that made my blood run cold, he added, "Don't go anywhere. We might need you again soon." 3 nights later, I was woken by headlights sweeping across my bedroom window. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, listening. Then came the knock. Slow. Heavy. I grabbed the bat I keep by the door and stepped outside. The tall man was standing in my yard. Behind him, the SUV idled. "You're coming with us," he said. "No, I'm not," I said, gripping the bat tighter. He smiled. "You are, or we'll find someone else to fit in that box tonight." I froze. Then, slowly, I lowered the bat. They drove me out of town, down back roads I didn't recognize until we reached an old abandoned slaughterhouse. Inside, under the flicker of a single hanging bulb, was another box. This one was open. And inside was a man. Alive. His mouth duct-taped, hands zip-tied, eyes wide with terror. Seal it, the tall man said. What? You built it. You seal it. I shouldn't do it, he said softly, or we'll put you in the next one. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the screws. I bolted the lid shut while the man inside thrashed and kicked, muffled screams filling the room. I told myself I'd go to the police after, that I'd do anything to stop them. But when the lid was sealed, the tall man handed me another envelope. You did good, he said, and then they drove me home. I didn't leave my house for 3 days. Didn't eat, didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's eyes staring back at me through the gap in the box. On the 4th day, I finally broke. I drove straight to the sheriff's office, told them everything. Names, dates, descriptions, the slaughterhouse location. They nodded grimly, said they'd look into it. That night, my phone rang. You talked to the cops? The tall man asked. My heart stopped. Before I could answer, he said, come outside. I hung up, grabbed my bat, and stepped out onto the porch. The SUV was there again. The tall man stepped out, but this time he wasn't smiling. You made a mistake, he said. Then the back door opened. They dragged someone out. Jonas, my best friend, bloodied, gagged, hands tied. Get in the truck, the tall man said. Both of you. They drove us back to the slaughterhouse. Inside were 2 boxes this time. One open, one closed. The tall man tossed me a power drill. You get to choose, he said. Him or you. One of you doesn't leave tonight. Jonas was sobbing, trying to scream through the gag, his body shaking like a terrified child. I stood frozen, the drill heavy in my hand, the smell of the place, oil, rust, blood, wrapped around me like a noose. I thought about my wife, my little shop, the man in the last box. I couldn't do it again. I turned the drill on the tall man. He lunged at me, but I squeezed the trigger and felt the bit bite deep into his shoulder with a sickening crunch. Blood sprayed, warm and metallic, across my face. He screamed, not just a yell, but an animal howl, and crashed into me, knocking me backward. The drill flew from my hand. We hit the concrete hard. His hands went to my throat, squeezing. Jonas, still on his knees, threw himself sideways, knocking over the stocky man. The tall man's grip tightened. My vision went white at the edges. I grabbed blindly, and my fingers found the claw of a hammer lying nearby. I swung. The first hit caught him in the ribs. He grunted, but didn't let go. I swung again, higher this time, and felt the hammer connect with bone. His grip loosened just enough for me to gasp for air. Jonas kicked free of the other man and headbutted him with a wet crack. The stocky man went down screaming, blood pouring from his nose. I rolled on top of the tall man and swung the hammer again, this time with everything I had. It connected with his temple. There was a dull, final sound, a sound I will never forget. He went limp. The stocky man scrambled for a knife on the floor. Jonas kicked it away and jumped on him. The struggle was savage, grunts, fists, the sound of skull on concrete. Jonas grabbed the fallen knife and, with a guttural yell, plunged it into the man's side. The man thrashed, blood pooling under him, then went still. I just sat there on the concrete, covered in blood, staring at the 2 bodies. Jonas was crying, shaking so hard he could barely cut the ropes from his wrists. We didn't speak. We just ran. The police found the bodies 2 hours later. They called it self-defense, said the men were part of an organized crime ring responsible for multiple disappearances. The case made the news for a week. Then it was forgotten. But I haven't forgotten. I still wake up at night hearing the sound of fists pounding inside that box, hearing the drill bite into flesh, hearing Jonas's sobs. I burned my shop to the ground a month later. I don't build boxes anymore. I don't build anything, because every time I pick up a hammer, I hear that man's voice. You're part of this now. And I wonder if I ever really left that slaughterhouse. My name is Olivia Beth. I'm 26 now, a nurse at Fremont General Hospital, the one everyone sees smiling at patients and cracking dumb jokes to keep spirits up. People say I'm good with patients because I'm calm under pressure, but that calm was forged in hell. When I was 15, my mom remarried. Her first husband, my father, had died when I was 6, leaving us with the house and a modest inheritance. My mom, Betty, kept her head down, worked long hours at the post office, and didn't date for years. Then along came Andrew Beth. He was charming, funny, the kind of man who made Mom laugh again. I remember being cautiously hopeful. Maybe we'd finally have a family again. But within months, Andrew showed who he really was. He was a drunk, a mean one. At first, it was just shouting. A slammed door here, a plate broken there. Then came the shoving, the nights I'd hear my mom crying in the bathroom, the mornings she'd cover her bruises with makeup. And then he turned his attention on me. It started small. Comments about how I was starting to look like a woman, brushing past me too close, his hand lingering too long. Then came the whispers, filthy and disgusting, said just loud enough for me to hear when Mom's back was turned. I told her. Of course I told her. She tried to defend me once. She stood up to him, said she'd call the police. The next day, she showed up at work with a black eye and never brought it up again. After that, she just tried to keep him calm, but there was no calming him. One night when Mom was on a late shift, he came to my room. He was holding a syringe, said it would take the edge off and help me loosen up. I locked the door, pressed my back against it as he pounded and shouted, and stayed there until morning. That was the night I decided I had to run. I spent weeks planning, stashed clothes in a backpack, hid a little cash, kept a kitchen knife under my pillow because I didn't trust what he'd do if he caught me packing. And then came the night everything snapped. It was past midnight when I woke to shouting downstairs. Andrew's voice was louder than usual, slurred and angry. Mom's voice was desperate, pleading. Then came a crash that made the whole house shake. I crept down the hall and peeked over the banister. Mom was on the kitchen floor, clutching her ribs, crying. Andrew stood over her, his face twisted with rage, holding that syringe again. When his bloodshot eyes found me at the top of the stairs, he grinned. "Well, look who's up," he said. I bolted. He came after me instantly, thundering up the stairs. I grabbed my backpack and the knife, sprinting for the back door, but he caught me by the hair before I could get it open. Pain exploded in my scalp as he yanked me backward, dragging me down the hall. "Thought you'd sneak out?" he spat, breath reeking of whiskey. I kicked and screamed, but he was too strong. He dragged me into the living room and slammed me to the floor. My knife clattered out of reach. The syringe rolled across the carpet. "You think you can just leave this house whenever you want?" he snarled, pinning me with his knee. I fought like hell, scratched his face, bit his arm hard enough to taste blood. He roared, slammed my wrists against the floor so hard I saw stars. And then Mom moved. She had crawled into the kitchen, grabbed the cast iron skillet from the counter. "Let her go!" she screamed, and swung with everything she had. The skillet connected with the back of his head with a sickening crack. He stumbled forward, stunned, but didn't go down. He turned, blood running down his temple, and charged at her. I grabbed the knife and scrambled to my feet. He slammed Mom against the wall, his hands around her throat. I lunged and drove the knife into his side. He roared, dropped Mom, and spun on me. What followed was a blur of blood and terror. He tackled me to the floor, fists flying, landing blows that knocked the wind out of me. I stabbed again, this time hitting his shoulder. He bellowed and swung, his fists smashing into my jaw so hard my ears rang. Mom grabbed the skillet and hit him again, this time across the face. He staggered back, spitting blood, and then went for her. I leapt on his back, stabbing over and over, sobbing, screaming until he collapsed to his knees. Still he fought, swinging wildly, catching me across the cheek with the back of his hand so hard I spun sideways. The room smelled like iron and sweat and fear. Mom kicked him in the stomach, knocking him backward. I crawled to the knife, my hands slick with blood, and stabbed one last time, deep into his side. This time he went down and stayed down, groaning, clutching the wound. For a second, all I could hear was my own ragged breathing. Then Mom grabbed my hand. "We have to go." We fled barefoot into the night, still in our pajamas, leaving a trail of blood down the porch steps. We ran until we saw the neighbor's porch light and banged on their door. When they saw us, bloodied, shaking, barely able to stand, they called the police. Andrew lived. They carried him out on a stretcher, still glaring at me. The trial was brutal. I had to sit there, 15 years old, and describe every disgusting thing he'd ever done while he smirked at me from across the courtroom. But we won. The bruises, the blood, the syringe they found in his pocket, everything proved what he'd been doing. He was sentenced to 15 years. People say that should have been closure, but it wasn't. I still wake up drenched in sweat, convinced I hear his boots on the stairs, the creak of my bedroom door. Mom never remarried. I never went back to that house. And next year, he's up for parole. I lie awake some nights wondering what I'll do if he comes looking for me. Wondering if I could do it again. Wondering if this time I wouldn't stop stabbing until he stopped breathing. My name is Officer Claire Monroe, badge number 4127. I've been with the Millhaven Police Department for 6 years. I used to think I could handle anything this job threw at me. Domestic calls, meth labs, bar fights. But last winter, during a stretch of midnight shifts, I learned what real terror is. Millhaven is a quiet town most of the time. A few thousand people, 2 main streets, a handful of diners and hardware stores. I signed up for nights, thinking it would be calm. That night started slow. I was parked on the shoulder, sipping lukewarm coffee, listening to static on the radio when the call came through. Unit 24, welfare check requested, 1065 Canyon Road. Caller anonymous, female screaming heard inside residence. No further details. Welfare checks can go either way. Either you find a drunk guy passed out, or you find something that makes you wish you never knocked. I pulled up 10 minutes later. The house sat at the end of a gravel road, porch light flickering. No cars in the driveway. The front door was cracked open just enough to make my stomach tighten. I radioed dispatch. Unit 24 on scene, door ajar, approaching residence. Hand on my Glock, flashlight in my other hand, I stepped inside. The smell hit me first, coppery, metallic. Then I heard it, a faint scraping sound, like something being dragged across the floorboards. Millhaven PD, I called. Hello? No answer. I moved deeper into the hallway. The beam of my flashlight passed over family photos, smiling parents, a teenage girl in soccer gear, and then over something wet on the wall. Blood. It wasn't just a smear. It was a handprint, fingers spread wide, dripping down to the baseboard. My pulse spiked. Dispatch, I have blood inside the residence. Requesting backup, I whispered into the radio, but the radio crackled back with static. Dead zone. I was alone. I followed the scraping sound toward the kitchen. That's when I saw her. A woman, maybe mid-40s, crouched on the linoleum, her face pale, streaked with tears. She was dragging something across the floor. It took me a second to realize what it was. A man's body. His throat was open, blood pooling beneath his head, his eyes glassy. The woman froze when my light hit her. "Ma'am," I said, gun raised. "Step away from him, hands where I can see them." She didn't move. Instead, she smiled. Not the smile of someone relieved help had arrived. A thin, eerie smile that made every hair on my neck stand up. "You're too late," she whispered. Then she bolted. I chased her through the house, my boots slipping on blood. She was fast, darting down the basement steps before I could catch her. I followed, because that's what we're trained to do, though every instinct screamed not to. The basement was dark, colder than it should have been. I swept the flashlight around and froze. There were 3 chairs arranged in a circle. Each chair had straps attached, duct tape, zip ties, even rope. And next to them, a workbench lined with tools, not household tools, things like pliers, hooks, wires. And on the far wall, written in blood, were 4 words, "One more to go." I heard movement behind me. Too late, something slammed into my shoulder, sending me sprawling. The flashlight clattered away, beam spinning crazily across the concrete. Before I could grab my gun, she was on me, nails clawing, teeth bared. I fought back, elbowing her hard enough to break free. I scrambled for my gun, leveled it at her. "Down! Now!" I screamed. She didn't stop. I fired. The shot echoed like a cannon in the basement. She collapsed, clutching her leg, screaming. Not in pain, but in rage. "You ruined it," she shrieked. "You were supposed to sit in the last chair." Backup finally arrived minutes later, sirens washing the house in red and blue. They found 3 bodies upstairs: the husband, the teenage daughter, and a man later identified as a neighbor. The woman, her name was Lydia Crane, had killed them all over the course of the night. And me, I had nearly been number 4. But the real horror came later. During interrogation, Lydia never stopped smiling. She told us everything: how she'd planned the night for months, how she'd lured the neighbor over first, then waited for her husband and daughter to come home. And then she said something I'll never forget. "I didn't want you dead. I wanted you to watch. To see what a real family looks like when you cut away the lies." Then she laughed. A soft, terrible sound.